Hey, it's me.
She's a former mayor. They're a former evangelical pastor with dissociative identity disorder. These two like to talk about the topics you're not supposed to talk about. They might cause you to perspire just a bit, but they'll definitely make you inspired. Let's talk religion and politics, and what spirituality and emotional well-being look like in a post-evangelical world. This is Paul and Ashley on Evangelicalish.
All right, here we are, everyone, on Wednesday, 9/11. Did I see today? It's 23 years since I started to say the original 9/11. I guess we've had 9/11s for a long time, but the 9/11 we commemorate was 23 years ago now. That's pretty crazy.
It's hard to imagine. And I know we all just instantly go back to that place. Like, I exactly remember where I was, what happened when we were on the West Coast. Paul, you were working at a radio station. I was getting ready for work. Our daughter, who's now almost 25, was in her crib. And I was getting ready before my mom would come to take care of our daughter, and I would go to work, and you called and said, turn on the TV. And like, everything changed. Remember it like it was yesterday, and yet all these years have passed.
Yeah, crazy day. So now I've been on the road for 32 days. Here I am at home, and where in the world are you?
I'm in a little city known as Detroit.
Detroit.
Some of you may call it Detroit, but I'm here to tell you it is a French word. So I'm trying to inspire the French. I think it's just so lovely. Detroit. I'm here for a conference with the Kresge Foundation, which is headquartered here in Detroit, and having so much fun.
And what is the Kresge Foundation?
Kresge Foundation. Here's my little prop for the night. So Kresge Foundation is a private family foundation. Kresge is the K in Kmart. So 100 years ago, the family that founded Kmart started a charitable foundation that continues to this day. And they've been involved in all kinds of cool work, including place-based community development. And there are 4 cities in the United States that have sort of this special partnership with Kresge, and Fresno is one of them.
Wow.
Along with Memphis and Detroit, Detroit, Fresno. What is the 4th? It's in
Cleveland.
here. It's in the book. I think it's Cleveland. Yeah.
I think you've told me
Anyway,
that
so yeah, we can talk about that in a little bit, but I'm just grateful. Did I say Detroit, New Orleans, Memphis,
New
and
Orleans
Fresno?
was the other one. That's right.
Yeah.
New Orleans.
But yeah, I'm just grateful to be on this call because about 30 seconds ago, I was in an Uber worried that I would not make it on time and that I was going to miss out. I'm so looking forward to this conversation tonight with, we'll call him Thomas when he's on, but I'm going to call him Dr. Thomas Oord and give him his proper due for his academic credentials that he brings to this conversation. But I've been looking forward for weeks to listening in and being a part of this conversation. So I made it, and I'm glad.
You did. And before we get to Tom, we were in different cities last night, but we both were at debate watch parties. And we went live after the previous first presidential debate of the year. That one was a little bit less fun than last night. Last night was better.
And say more about the environment in which you were watching the debate.
I have a Tuesday night tavern theology group that is kind of my church, I guess, right now. And we get together at a local pub and talk theology or have some tavern time or whatever we do. And so some of the folks from that came to our house last night and watched the debate, which I was so happy. I was too nervous to watch it on my own. And then we had lots and lots of fun.
Okay, so this is my scenario. I'm in a city, just staying in a hotel. I don't know what's what. I'm at a conference, but I'm not staying at the hotel conference. I'm at a different location. And I'm with some colleagues. There are probably a dozen people here from Fresno. We're all here as a part of this big community development conference. And all day we were stressed. how are we going to make sure we can watch this debate? So we happen to be walking through the hallway in the hotel, and we see a sign for another conference that is actually having its meetings here. And it had this thing, watch party. So we're like, you guys, let's go crash that watch party. So we like get there, and like, the lady like was giving out drink tickets, and we're like, okay, we're not with your conference, we're with another conference, and la la la. And like, can we come in? She's like, come on in. So we got to sit with this other group that was, I don't know, talking about renewable energy and equitable climate solutions. We're like, hallelujah, we'll join you. And gosh, it was about a couple hundred people in a hotel ballroom. We were all on pins and needles, but I'll tell you this. I mean, I knew at the handshake that it was going to be like she was on her toes. And then in his first rebuttal to something she said, she had him on the defense. And I was like, okay, brilliant. Like, that's exactly how it needed to play out. And then she kept it up for 90 minutes. And it was pretty freaking awesome.
See, I don't think people are making enough of the fact that she walked over to his podium, stuck out her hand and said, Kamala. Like, I thought that was brilliant. And,
listen.
he always mispronounces her name intentionally. And she walks over and sticks out her hand and says, Kamala. And of course,
and the microphones caught it, right?
Yeah,
like they weren't lapel mic'd, they were podium mic'd. And
Right.
so his mic at the podium catches her being assertive. And oh my God, I knew it. I knew it. And having been in, a few debates in Fresno, like we did probably like 40 debates a year. I'm not kidding you. And like in our little town, like it's kind of a big thing. And obviously it's relative. And I know that I was by no means on such a pressure packed stage, but there is a thing about you have to come out strong. Like it sets the tone. If you do not hit it hard right up front, you have a hard time like climbing back on top of the beach ball. And she did. And that handshake was nothing but power dynamic redefined.
Yeah. And throwing her name out there. And he couldn't even look at her. I think
No,
he was just so pissed that he had to
he's so
debate a woman. And yeah.
so disrespectful. And I loved that she kept looking at him. And then back to the camera. I mean, it was as flawless a performance as I could. Now, some could say like, Anne, did that persuade voters? I don't know. But what I do know is that if she had not gotten a 10 out of 10 and stuck the landing on that, we would not, like today it would like basically be over. Like I think there's 4 giant steps left in this campaign. That was one of them. There's 3 remaining, but she couldn't do these other 3 if she didn't nail that one. And she nailed it hardcore.
I was telling the people at the watch party here, surely he's not going to talk about the dogs being eaten in Ohio. Surely he's not that stupid. And very early, like in the first 7 minutes of the debate, he went to the dog eating.
So, and I want to say
conspiracy
one thing
theory.
about that, and then I want to just talk quickly about the Taylor Swift deal, and then
Okay.
we have
And then we
so
go to
many
our
cool
guest.
things to talk about. But so on the dog thing, I remember distinctly moving to California's Central Valley in the mid to late 80s. So in Fresno, large Southeast Asian population who had been transplanted here by the federal government after the Vietnam War. So, if you could, at the time, I kind of as a kid was like, oh gosh, these communities must have been here forever. No, they'd only been in this foreign land, the United States, for like, 10, 15 years. And now we're on like 3rd generation Southeast Asian, et cetera. But like 1st gen, do you know, it was widely rumored, and people literally, like white people warned me when we moved to Fresno, like, be careful if you live next to Southeast Asian families, they'll eat your pets. That's just like a racist trope that literally transcends the decades. And for it to like show up again here, like it's not new or original. Like this is kind of like what xenophobic folks have been saying for a long time, all the time.
I actually had somebody comment on one of my social media platforms today with a screenshot saying in these, and it listed a bunch of Asian countries. It was talking about how they eat dogs and cats. And I, of course, had to remind her that Haiti is not near those countries, um, just to be helpful. But yes, it is a racist dog whistle, as Doug tells us. And then the childless cat lady, Taylor Swift, finished off the
So,
evening.
oh my goodness gracious. All right. So let's imagine that that was spontaneous. That's really cool. Let's imagine that it was perfectly orchestrated, timed out, drafted, blah, 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 behind the scenes. She's going to nail the debate. Then we're going to go. Because, like, this is what you have to do is, like, plan it out, like the hit, the hit, the hit, the hit. In either case, whether it was spontaneous or was planned, perfect orchestration. So we were like all excited about it. So I was watching the post debate coverage, and here comes the tweet or the X or Instagram post, whatever. So that was really fun, and watched Coach Walls hear about it, etc. I wake up this morning, and did you see Elon Musk's response to that?
Yeah, what an asshole.
So as I learned that our kids told us that social media refers to him as elongated muskrat, Elon Musk. Like, I'm gonna say, like, I don't even repeat it. It was so disgusting to me. Disgusting.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
out loud in public. Like, this is what's, last thought here, I promise. Last thought.
As some say,
I
being disgusting like that on the right now is an attribute, not a
guess
detriment.
so.
Yeah.
I guess so. Anyway, I was listening to some of the post debate coverage, and our Governor Newsom, was talking about, like, the journalist was trying to get him to say, like, kind of, was this a game over, everything's great moment? And he's like, tons of praise, it was amazing, etc. But he's like, let's not pay attention to this exact moment. He said it's really not even the punditry that in the response, like, sort of the ecosystem chattering class. He goes, let's pay attention to how the Trump campaign, how he responds, and how kind of his, brokers and spokespeople, how they respond. And, like, we'll get a sense here pretty early on, what most got under his skin based on, like, what we see from them over the next couple of days. And that's the more interesting thing to watch.
Yeah. And they're blaming the moderators right now, which of course means they know they lost. So
Yeah. Did I
all
just
right.
change our screen, by the way? Did I do that? Do
You
you see how we,
did.
like, zoomed in?
Yes, you
My
did that.
apologies. I was trying to respond to Doug on the left, and I was like, I'm not going to say what the elongated muskrat said, but I'm going to type it. So that's what I was doing, and I changed
Okay.
our screen. Okay.
So we'll be hearing your clickety clack of your keyboard soon. Well, let's get to our guest tonight. It's Thomas J. Oord, a theologian, philosopher, scholar of multidisciplinary studies, author or editor of more than 20 books, a professor at Northwest Nazarene University in Nampa, Idaho. He attended Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City, Mo, and got a PhD at Claremont in Southern California. So he has been everywhere, and is also the father of open and relational theology. Is that right? Are you the guru of open and relational theology, Tom?
I wouldn't claim to be the guru. I would claim to be the person who coined the label, but there you go.
Well, very nice to have you on again. You and I have spoken before.
Yeah.
So great to have you on. And although the circumstances are a little bit different, so you've been with the Church of Nazarene, an ordained minister for more than 30 years. And in July, you underwent a trial, literally a trial. And so tell us what happened. You got a letter and they called you in and put you on trial.
Yeah, well, the story really begins in late 2021 when a conservative group in the Midwest sent allegations, or I guess he didn't call them charges. Anyway, they were allegations that I was wrong on several theological matters, but the real important one was that I was queer affirming. And I was called into my district superintendent, who's kind of like a bishop in our tradition. And the district superintendent asked me if I wanted to hand in my credentials for being queer affirming, or face the next steps of the process, which would be a hearing. And after checking with my wife, because she and I have been through some tough stuff together, I wanted to make sure she was on board. I said no, I wanted to face the next step, which in that case was a hearing in early 2022, in which for a couple hours I made the case that the Church of the Nazarene ought to become fully queer affirming. And the group that heard my arguments did not recommend that I be disciplined, which surprised everybody.
Mm.
But my district superintendent decided to take away my what we call our assignment in my tradition. And that then, step by step, which included me and my daughter publishing a book called Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Be Fully Affirming, led to a trial in July of 2024. This, what is that, a month and a half ago? Yeah. Um, and at that trial, I was found guilty. They took away my credentials and they took away my membership in the Church of the Nazarene.
Wow. So not only defrocked you, but kicked you out, basically. Like, is
Yeah.
that an excommunication of a defellowship?
Yeah. Well, technically, it's an excommunication, although I'm still attending a little Nazarene church, and they're allowing me to do that. But yeah, it's really, I expected to lose my ministerial credentials, but I did not expect them to take away my membership.
Wow. Can any Church of the Nazarene member lose their membership for being affirming?
I think I'm the first one.
Mm.
I'm the first one to go through a trial and have my credentials and my membership removed. I don't know of any other person who's had their membership taken away for being queer affirming. You know, a lot of people will walk away from the church voluntarily when they have a change of views on queer matters. And, you know, there's an important place for that. I'm not saying that's worse, you know, somehow lesser than what I did, but I felt like I had the sort of status and the reputation that maybe going through the process could be helpful to queer people and to allies and could maybe inch the denomination closer to a fully affirming position.
Yeah, I was going to ask why you and your spouse agreed to go through it,
Yeah.
because it can't be fun to stand up in
No,
front of a group that says you're a heretic.
not fun at all. And really the months leading up to it were filled with lots of anxiety, lots of shortness of breath and, you know, health issues. Um, and, you know, lots of questioning, like what's the right thing I ought to do at this moment. But I took a more aggressive approach to it than probably most would. So I assumed when they gave me the charges in the summer of 2023 and said that the trial would be that fall, I assumed that I was going to lose my case because there had already been one other individual who'd gone through the process and he lost his credentials simply for writing an essay in this book that my daughter and I edited. And his essay was basically saying, we need to have the conversation. And I had been doing many, many more egregious things from the perspective of the denomination than that. So I was pretty confident I was going to lose my credentials. So I decided that I would um, make my case, make my trial an opportunity to sort of become a platform to try to expand the conversation. And so I wrote my defense, and before the trial even started, I published it as a book and made it available for 99 cents as an ebook and $5 for a print on Amazon. I hired media people to help me put this stuff out there. I hired a videographer. I decided I wanted to take the case public because I was pretty confident that the jury was not going to be very favorable to my arguments. But I thought that the wider public needed to have the conversation, or at least those in the Church of the Nazarene needed to.
Yeah, you haven't kept it very well hidden that you were affirming, correct?
No, no.
In fact, I'm curious if you could walk us through. I read the media coverage of your story that, like 30 years ago you made this decision, and maybe just catch us up on like what was going on for you back then, because that's kind of a surprise. Like, these days it's not quite as uncommon as people like coming to the light and being like, "Hey, we should change the way we think about this." But 30 years ago was a long time ago. So what was that pursuit like for you, and how did you arrive at that conclusion that that's where you would stand?
I was in seminary at Kansas City at the time, and I had to take a religious education class. Now, my specialty is philosophical theology, so most of the other people in the class were going to be, youth pastors, children's pastors, but I had to take this for the degree, and so I went into it, and I thought, um, maybe what I ought to do is really get to the bottom of what in those days we called the homosexuality question. And I had a couple of other classmates who were interested too. And so we took what's called the Wesleyan quadrilateral, which is a rubric to think about theological ideas by looking
I
at
mean, that old
scripture.
thing. We
Yeah,
were
you
all
know
we were
that
all
thing.
dealing with the Wesleyan quadra blah blah blah
Yeah.
Rubik's cube
Okay.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Sorry.
with you. I
I won't
gotcha.
explain it to you. Yeah. And in that process, I looked at the biblical passages that were relevant and discovered that there were really sharp biblical scholars who either said that what the passages were addressing didn't apply to today, or were pointing to the assumptions and the cultural biases and the patriarchy of the writers of Scripture. And so I concluded that I should be affirming. Then the question was, do I stay in the Church of the Nazarene? Because at that time, we definitely weren't having the conversation, as you mentioned earlier. And I stayed in the church for three reasons. One, I thought the basic theological framework of the denomination, which I think centers on love, supports a fully affirming position. So theologically, I thought I had a good basis to stay. Secondly, I discovered that there were others in the denomination, most of them academics and scholars, who were also affirming. So I wasn't the only one. And I thought, well, maybe, there can be a group of us that we can make some momentum here. And third, I wanted to be a college professor. And I knew that students coming in who are 18, 19, 20 years old are asking questions about sexuality that they haven't had the space to ask prior to coming to college. And I wanted to be able to help them. And I wanted to be an ally. In those days, we used the word ally, but that's what I wanted to be. So that's what I did for, well, 20 years or so. I was kind of I felt guilty, to be honest with you, because I
Mm,
couldn't be as out and open as I wanted to be, but I felt like I was doing important work to try to bring about change, and I was helping students. Um, there's one moment in that time period that it sticks out to me because it was roughly 2008, 2009, 2010, something like that. There was a PBS special called "For the Bible Tells Me So." And it featured Eugene Robinson, who was the first openly gay bishop in the Episcopal Church.
mhm.
And it followed the stories of some families who were, had kids who were coming out and um, kind of the consequences and how they struggled. And my wife and I decided we wanted our young, either teen or preteen daughters to watch this with us. We knew what the message was going to be, and we wanted them to hear about, you know, again, in those days, just used the word homosexuality. We didn't talk so much about trans, bi, and that sort of stuff. Um, and when my kids watched it, they came to the same conclusion that their mother and their father that we had. And I realized then that now we had kids who were going to be going to a local Church of the Nazarene who had a different view on queer matters than the congregation. And that was hard because I was kind of putting them against the little church that we were going to. Actually, it wasn't a
Mm.
little church; it was a mega church. But yeah, so
Mm.
I could keep going, but I'll stop there. I think that kind of answers your question, Ashley.
Yeah. So it would have been we're talking early to mid 90s is when this process started for you.
Yeah, late '93 or early '94, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that was a time of it wasn't quite like the 80s when, AIDS and all of that was going on, but still uh the church. So how did how do you handle Sodom and Gomorrah and all of the things that and you and I we were talking about 1946 the movie before we came on here.
Yeah.
How do you handle the clobber passages, as we call them now, of the passages that people use to clobber gay people within the Bible?
Yeah, I've got a variety of strategies depending on the passage. I think the Sodom and Gomorrah passage is about lack of hospitality and treating strangers poorly. It's not about same-sex loving relations. Uh,
Ezekiel thought so too, right?
right. Yes. Yeah. I think the Leviticus passage is somehow raised up. That's the one that says a man shall not lie with another man. Is somehow raised up as applying for all times, and yet other prohibitions in that same book, like not wearing clothes made of two different kind of fabrics, or not having two different kinds of uh, crops in the same field, and other things, we ignore those. So I thought to myself, well, I can obviously think that's a cultural or historical a bias that may not apply today. I think of all the passages, Paul, I think it's the Romans passage that gets quoted the most, because that in that one, Paul is making this argument against idolatry. And he's talking about women, as he puts it, putting aside their natural desires for men and lying with women and men with men. I think that's the one that gets quoted the most. And I like to do a couple of things with that one. One, I like to point out that the Apostle Paul also says it's unnatural for men to have long hair. So none of us think that's necessarily sinful. So why do we think his view on what's unnatural in terms of men with men and women with women should also apply today? And then,
Yeah.
of course, there's arguments about whether or not he had in mind a older man to younger boy kind of scenario. But I prefer to go with talking about Paul's inherent patriarchy and his cultural biases than the other route.
He also said you shouldn't get married unless you're just too weak to fight off
Right,
the lust, you know?
right, yeah. Women should be silent in church, and a
Yeah, all
lot of
those
things
things.
I think are crap.
I wonder if, over the years, if you could reflect on, um, the extent to which you felt like being able to present reasoned, academically, theologically sound reasoning to people. Like, over the years, have you seen that be an effective strategy for people's hearts and minds to be changed? And if so, is it different today than maybe when you might have experienced that, a couple decades back?
Yeah. I'm an academic. I'm used to making academic arguments. I think they have a place and a role, but I don't think they're the most effective means for getting people to becoming full affirming. I think the most effective means are when people know personally folks who are queer.
Mm.
If it's their sister, their brother, their cousin, their kid, or whatever, their neighbor. Once you get to know someone who's queer and know them well, you start to change your ideas about what's going on. And so, again, I think doing the arguments, and I can do them for you if you'd like me to here, are important. But I, I don't want to put too much on the shoulders of queer people, but I think most people change their mind because they get to know someone who's queer as a friend. And so, if queer people have the opportunity and the courage to make friends with others, I think that's the most likely way that people change their minds.
Mhm. That's so good and a great question, Ashley, because I think that's my experience is just wanting to love people and feeling like the Bible told me I couldn't. And even I remember our daughter, I think she was maybe in 7th grade, telling me, Dad, you know, I have queer friends and they're not going to hell. They're just not going to hell, you know, and that little heart. But having been on this trip with the 1946 movie, where the academics become very important, one of the spaces where they become very important is there's a lot of queer people who want to have faith or be Christian even, but they can't because the Bible is a triggering factor. And to be able to say, no, the Bible does not call you an abomination, gives them that space back. I think that's really important.
I think what I do there, and this is sort of a quick gloss over here, so this is at the 20,000-foot view. I say what I think are the main themes of Scripture revolve around love. I'm committed to love first and foremost. I think Jesus is too. I think the biblical witness, it's got a variety of things to say about God. Some I don't like, I'll just be honest with you. But the general picture is a God of steadfast love. So if love is my center, and that's my hermeneutical lens, that's what I use to interpret all the passages in Scripture, then I have to ask myself, can same-sex behavior, queer identity, can that be healthy? Can it be loving? If love aims at well-being, can that kind of way of living, that quote lifestyle, can that be a good thing? And I think the overwhelming scientific evidence is that it is and can be good. I'm not saying that all queer people are angels and they always have healthy sex. I'm not saying that at all. Straight people don't do that either.
Right.
But I am saying that I know of same-sex partners who have a loving, healthy sexual relationship. And if love aims at health, then there's no reason to say that queer folks are somehow sinful or going to hell.
So we're going to just take a quick break, and then I want to come back and ask you about the actual trial and have you kind of walk us through what that was like, and just kind of get kind of be in that moment with you if we can, like in our imaginations. But first, we have a quick break. And
all right, I'll put you back in the green room so you don't have to be with us on this commercial.
There you go. You don't have to endure the promotional break here on Evangelicalish.
All right.
So I'm really excited to let folks know that somebody in this little chitty chat right here, somebody is about to have a birthday. And that person would be none other than Pastor Paul.
And we believe in the birthday month.
The birth month. So the 9th month, this month of September. The month of Paul's birth is something that we are excited about and celebrating. And also, fun fact, we have a soon-to-be 21-year-old son, Sam, who shares the exact same birthday as Paul.
He was born on my birthday. That's right.
Pregnant, trying to give birth to this kid who ended up on his due date, which is September 26th, 9.5 pounds on his due date, everybody. Just want you to get your head around that for a second.
That was a big-headed baby boy.
A big child comes out of moi. And I took to the hospital a watch because I knew that was my husband's birthday. So I was like, I'm going to have the baby. Here's the baby, and here's your watch for your birthday. So we've always made birthdays to be a very big deal. And so I wonder if you all would join me in celebrating Paul. Here's what Paul has asked for. He'd love for you to buy a copy of his book. Okay, you can, my screen doesn't show it the right way. Religiously right, religiously wrong. Religious right, religiously wrong.
The religious right, religiously wrong.
A modern day parable. I actually took it on my little road trip, and I'm rereading it now for the 3rd time. And it's still so sweet, so tenderhearted, so relevant. And now, especially for this conversation that we're having with Thomas, even right now, it's just about the journey of a pastor who has a heart for people and God, but is kind of put in this box of like, but I can't love people. Does all this sound familiar, by the way? Like, I wonder why Paul wrote this story. So anyway, love for you all to have a copy of that book, and you can get it. Paul, remind us by going to
on Amazon or on my website, pastor-paul.com. But I'm also asking one other thing, and I'm also giving for my birthday. I want people on my birthday, the 26th, to promote the book on social media. So
Got it.
they need to buy the book, read it, and then promote it on the 26th. And I'm going to give away 10 free copies to people who say they'll do that. So
Hey,
I haven't got
let's
the
go.
page up on the website just yet, but I will by the end of the day. They can go sign up. And if you have the book already, you can go sign up and say, I will do the promotion. You don't have to put me in the drawing for the book, but I'm going to give away 10 free books to people who say, I will promote it. Or you can just go on there and say, I'll promote it. I've already got the book. You don't need to do it. And then on the 26th, I want a whole bunch of people to say, I've read it. It's a book that's been in my heart. I had all people who prophesied, you're going to write a book one day. And I thought, yeah, that's what Christianity needs, is another book. We don't have enough books out there. That's what the problem is with Christianity. But then I thought, Jesus told story. And so I think I'll tell a story. And so I wrote a novel about what I think Jesus would say to evangelicalism about its right-wing partnership, were he incarnate in America today. And that's what the book is about. And so that's it. So
Okay.
you can sign up
Also,
and
I
get
remember.
a freebie and promote it. You remember?
Sorry, I'm on like hotel Wi-Fi. Sorry about that. Pucky from last week, you are owed an autographed copy of this book, but you have to
Truth.
send Paul your address. So if you feel comfortable doing that, great. If not, no hard feelings. But we want to make good on the offer last week. And thank you. I saw your hi in the chat earlier, so just wanted to say hi to you and thanks for joining. Richard, saw your comment. So glad you've read it twice. I weeped. And some of you may know I can be a little bit of a hard ass when I'm reading documents and reading literature. And I was kind of went into it we'll see if this is a good book. And by the end, I'm sobbing. It just was really so tender and so sweet. So yay. Happy birthday to Paul.
Love it. All right. So we'll keep talking about that, but it's not on the website yet, but it will be. If you are on my newsletter list, you did receive a link to that survey in the newsletter. So, all right. Is that the only thing we're promoting for this break?
I mean, wouldn't hurt to say support, subscribe. You can always do that. We'll talk about it at the end of the show. So let's get back to our conversation.
Oh, I know.
Dr. T.
We're also going to have my Christian nationalism presentation coming up in a Zoom forum in a week. But we'll talk about that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, let's make sure we circle back to that so people know it's coming next week, both Wednesday, our regular time, and then an extra bonus feature next weekend. So yeah, you'll
Zoom
definitely want to stick
discussion
around
group. All right.
and learn about that.
Now back to our guest. Welcome back, Tom.
All right.
Hey, thanks.
Just like that. We're back from our commercial break. I feel like I'm hawking subscriptions to public TV right now. Paul and I actually used to do for fun in our younger days to support our local public television station.
Well, people like to tell me, well, Jesus didn't ask for money. I'm like, the Bible says Jesus had rich women who were taking care of him. Come on now. And somehow Judas was stealing money from the money purse. So there had to be enough money in there that money was disappearing and they didn't know it was disappearing. So
exactly. We'll take a few patrons and matrons around here.
I do know Ashley wants to ask you about the trial, but Doug had a question as well. And in the chat here on our live stream, and he says, I imagine a majority of your support system also collapsed. How have your colleagues reacted now that you've been not only lost your ordination with the Church of Nazarene or your assignment and your membership? What has happened with people around you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the truth is that my support system wasn't really that dependent upon the denomination prior to this. I work at a seminary in Florida that's not associated with the denomination anymore. It's called Northwind Theological Seminary, and they were very supportive. I have many, many friends and networks beyond the Church of the Nazarene as a denomination. I actually felt lots and lots of support, not only from friends and colleagues, but just even strangers would send me notes in support. So I'm fortunate in that way. I didn't feel isolated or alone.
And I wonder if we just got a great question, Silas. Thank you so much for your question. It's a doozy. Actually, Paul, let's go with Silas's question.
Oh, really?
It's
You
very.
don't want to go with the trial first, because that question's going to take us down a different path.
I know, but I was going to just do a touch on that. But sure, we can go here, then we'll go to Silas, and then back to the trial, because I feel like that's this dramatic TV show playing out in my mind. I want to hear Thomas talk about it.
Okay, great.
So yeah, pop the other one up real quick.
Which the one I just had up?
Yes.
That one?
You can't see it very well though. So let's just read it, perhaps.
I think you've lost me now. I'm not sure which question you're talking about.
Well, I
Are you
was talking
talking
about that one.
The Silas one about freely loving, that one?
That is where I was going to go next, but I thought, Paul, you wanted to. But anyway, let's do
Silas.
Silas.
I just popped up. 5Y News was just noting that their grandfather's family was Nazarene. That's not
Gotcha.
actually a question.
I thought that was okay.
That's just
yeah. Let's just touch on this real quick. I mean, it's with this. All due apologies for this is not a quick question. But so appreciate Silas.
Silas was at the debate party last night, by the way.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So we've got a two-parter here. I'm a big fan of Tom and his work. I have a philosophical question for Tom on God and love, and I'd love to hear his thoughts. So that's that. Let's go now to the next part of this question, which says this: if freely choosing to love another is essential to love, and if God can't but love, i.e. isn't free to choose to love or not love, then how is it that God is capable of love? Now that is a beautiful question for a theologian such as yourself.
Philosopher, yes.
Yeah, I'll start with a Donald Trump joke. I have a concept of an answer for this question.
Yes, very good. Very good.
Bravo.
No, the answer to this question, what Silas is bringing up is that I claim that humans have to freely choose to love, but then I say that God's nature is love, and God doesn't freely choose to love because it's God's very nature to do so. And he's saying, well, how is that possible? And the answer to that is, I think God's nature is love, and God must love, but God has free choices in how to love. And that is linked to metaphysical stuff that will go down the rabbit hole. But if the future is open and God is not 100% certain how things are going to play out, even God has to freely choose amongst options in each moment on what can be most loving. So there we go. A little quick technical thing.
Yeah.
You took us right there. That's awesome.
I was thinking about this yesterday, listening to another podcast, and I don't know what exactly your philosophy of heaven is, but if we talk about we can't know happiness without knowing sadness, then in heaven, will we not be happy because we'll never know sadness? Will there be no happiness in heaven?
I don't think we have to know sadness to know happiness. So, but you're right. Most theologians would say that. They would say something like, well, God could have made a world that was perfectly good and there was no evil, but we'd never appreciate it if it was only good. And I think that's crap for a number of reasons. One of them is I don't think God has the capacity to unilaterally create that kind of world. But that's another. But this actually brings up an issue related to our queer question that I'd like to address. And I'm guessing this is not going to be too controversial for you, but I think the issue of hell plays a big role in this whole discussion.
Definitely.
Because if you don't believe there is a literal hell, which is my position, that God isn't the kind of God who sends people to eternal conscious torment, then your ability to think through the issues on the queer matters is oftentimes enhanced because you don't have hanging over you the penalty, the punishment of eternal conscious torment if you make the wrong choice on queer matters. Instead, you get to ask this question: what kind of activities here and now actually promote abundant life? What kind of things can we do that will bring flourishing to ourselves and others on our planet? And if we ask that question, I think there's overwhelming evidence that queer people and queer relationships can promote flourishing.
Oh, love it
Yeah.
so much.
Y-
Um,
You're absolutely right, because when somebody says they're teaching our children it's okay to be gay, what they're saying is they're teaching our children to go to hell, and
Yeah, I think that's the
and
worry. Yeah.
our wonderful
yeah.
friends Beth and Lori, who have two wonderful children, we have many friends who would say, well, Beth and Lori are wonderful, but they're going to hell, and it's, that you add that into the mix, it makes a very different question, doesn't it?
Yep, it sure does.
And I know we're getting tight on time here, but we wanted to get those questions in because it's such a privilege to have you with us, Thomas, and just like our
Thanks.
audience is like so happy, like asking really good questions. But I just feel like, you've paid such a price to stand for and to be aligned to this message of the God of love. And maybe when like a lot of people weren't paying attention, you've paid a price to stand where you have stood. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about like what was it like in that actual moment, because you had this like mini decade run up to, and now you're on trial.
Yep.
What was that like? What exactly was the proceeding? Was it on Zoom? Was it on person? Did you have a lawyer? I mean, like, what? Tell us about that.
Yeah. I did not have a lawyer.
Okay.
Proceedings only allowed me to bring one person. And I decided I wanted my wife there because I planned to spend the rest of my life with her. And I thought we will be talking about this together for a long time. So I want her to witness it firsthand. Besides, when I came home, she would say, well, what'd they say? And I
You'd be like, I don't remember. Just calling me
exactly.
every day for 30 years. What did
That's right.
happen? I don't know.
I can't remember.
But leading up to the trial, I knew the charges against me, which was that I was teaching doctrines contrary to the denomination stance on human sexuality, and that I had acted in ways unbecoming of a minister for trying to advance a fully queer affirming agenda. So, and I had seen the evidence, the quote evidence they had against me. So I had sort of worked out all my arguments, which most of them revolved around the centrality of love. So I felt pretty good going into the trial that I sort of had intellectually or conceptually, I had my ducks in a row. My biggest prayer, Ashley, was that I would not only give an argument for love, but I would act in kind and loving ways. I wanted to be a witness to love in the way I responded. And to me, to be a witness of love doesn't mean I'm a wimpy, passive, not respond to bad arguments when I hear them, but it means that I do that in respectful way, and that I am kind, etc. So that was my big prayer going into this trial. And I'm happy to say that I did act in ways that I'm proud of. In fact, a couple of the jurors in the breaks came up to me and thanked me for my attitude and demeanor during the trial. But my wife and I showed up on the trial day. Things were supposed to start at 8 o'clock. So we got there a little bit early so we could plug in our computer. They walked us into a room, and the trial was already set up and people were waiting for us. So we
Ooh.
were kind of knocked off kilter at the very beginning. And then when I plugged in my computer, it malfunctioned, and I'm dealing with a computer that's screwed up. And
Oh no.
it was pretty frustrating there for those first couple of minutes. Then I wanted to record the proceedings and told them that. Well, first of all, they told me I couldn't record. Then I said, I'm going to record. I have that ability because of the state of Idaho. And they said, well, we're going to have to call our lawyers. So they dismissed us, and they called back to their lawyers to get advice. And they brought us back in, and they said, you have a choice. Either you don't record and we'll go ahead with it, or you can, or we'll go ahead without you. And so
Wow.
my wife, I said, well, we need to talk about this. And we went out, and I said, look, I would rather go ahead and have my day in court and make my case. But we did ask for transcripts of the trial, and they agreed to give us that. The next big move on the trial. Now I'm getting lots of details here. Are you sure you want this, Ashley? And
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
is
I'm so
fascinating.
in
Yeah.
it. I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm
this is
imagining
fascinating.
at some point you yell, you can't handle the truth. Like,
I
oh
love
my
it.
God, it's so
Yes.
intense right now.
We love courtroom dramas.
Well, the trial, the jury was comprised of 5 ordained elders and 2 laity who had been selected by the people in the denomination.
All
And
male, I'm guessing. All male.
no, there was 2
Oh,
women. 2 women
okay.
were.
All
Yep.
right.
And my opponents, so kind of like the prosecutors, were my district superintendent and the assistant district superintendent. Now, the person who was running the trial made a declaration that none of my witnesses could remain in the room throughout the trial. We had to call them in. And so when the trial began, their main witness was the district superintendent who was on the prosecuting team. So I said, look, this isn't fair. I'm either going to call in my witnesses or their witness, who's the district superintendent, has to leave. And this really threw things up in the air. Fortunately, I got my way on that one. The district superintendent left, and that put all of the weight then on the assistant to run that side of the trial for the rest of the day. That, I think, was a really important moment in the trial because he wasn't as confident, and he didn't have someone to, be a consultant with. And then the folks who were running the trial just said to me, look, we don't know what we're doing. This is the first time we've ever done this. So in some ways that was nice that they admitted that they were clueless, but it also meant problems because, I didn't know exactly how we should proceed. Should I object when someone said something on the other
Yeah,
side?
the rules of evidence. I mean, all
Yeah,
the stuff,
all that kind
right?
of
Yeah.
stuff, yeah. And fortunately, they said, "Yeah, I can object." And so it ran kind of like a quasi-typical trial, except in this case, there was no like judge and jury. Everyone was the jury, and there was one jury member who kind of acted as the head of the jury, who more or less called the shots on objections and things.
It seems to me though, like they couldn't, the verdict was predetermined because they would have to change the theology of the entire denomination to find you not guilty, right?
Oh, I think the verdict was predetermined. One of the
Yeah.
pre-motion trials was that I and my witnesses could not bring up the question of whether or not the statements on human sexuality in our manual should be considered doctrine. So they didn't want to have a theological argument. And yet, I'm being charged with teaching against doctrines from the denomination. So it's a theological charge. And what I did is I brought in some of the very most influential, best known theologians in the denomination to argue on my behalf. And my
Wow.
jury members, couldn't hold a candle to them
Yeah.
theologically.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Now,
So,
are your witnesses going to be kicked out now too, or?
well, I'm sure there'll be more things there. A couple of them were retired,
Uh,
and so they're going to be a little bit easier on them, I'm sure. But it's likely that others will
Yeah.
go to trial after this.
do
Have
you?
you
Oh, go
have
ahead,
you
Ashley.
released the transcripts? Like, are they public?
I have them, but I haven't released them yet. But I
Okay.
plan to release them. Yes, yeah.
Mm.
That's one of
I
the
mean,
things I said early on. I want full transparency, and that really
yes.
pissed off the jury.
I have to
Um,
tell you, this is a screenplay. Somebody needs to make this movie.
mm.
And playing off Joe's question here in the chat of our live stream, sometimes it's harder for the spouse. How is your wife doing out of all of this, having seen and heard you being accused by
Yeah.
fellow denomination members of this?
This trial was a little easier. So I should say I went through a trial in 2015 at my university over theological matters and lost my job over that.
And that was
Um,
for the open and relational theology?
yeah, I mean, technically it was for nothing. It was for the fact they laid me off because of a dip in enrollment. But the trial that I went through had those kinds of questions about evolution, about open and relational theology, all kinds of
Mm,
stuff. But the trial verdict there was that I was not guilty, and that's
okay.
why the the president of the university had to lay me off for dip and enrollment reasons rather than theological ones. But I
Okay.
bring that up because, I lost my job, and that caused a lot of stress in our house. My wife
Sure.
and I, had a very hard time. This
Yeah.
one was easier on her in that regard because I wasn't going to lose my job if I lost the trial.
Mm.
Um, and also, I don't know how to put this. I'll try to put it well. I tried to protect my wife because I know the way she thinks about these issues. And if I talk too much about things related to the trial, her mind's going to get fixated on that. Then she's not going to be able to sleep well, and then yada, yada,
Mm.
yada. So I
Mhm.
felt like as a loving husband, I needed to be very careful about how much I talked about my trial to her so as not to burden her too much. And that's a delicate balance because she's my best friend. And so I want to talk to my best friend about what's going on. And yet I also know that, and she knows that about herself as well. So it's not like I'm trying to, I don't know, pander or something. Um, so she was a
Oh,
big support for me
wow.
during the trial. She had some good advice several times that I followed. And again, just having her there with me to witness it, that was a really smart move on my part, I think.
And I say that from being, my official title was first due to Fresno when Ashley was mayor,
Yeah.
and she would be in conflict with somebody, and I'd be so pissed off,
Yeah.
and then someday I would be like, "Oh, that person's horrible," and she'd be like, "No, no, we talked it, we made up," and I'm like, "Well,
Right.
I didn't make up with them, I'm
Yeah.
still pissed," and
It's
uh,
like secondhand smoke. You don't get the
yeah,
filter. It's actually
Yeah.
worse for you, you know? Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure you have different personalities too. I mean, in my wife and I's case, in the first trial that I went through, and when I lost my job, she had a hard time going out in public and going to Church of the Nazarene
oh yeah,
because of
Totally.
she
I
was
get that.
worried about, what people were thinking.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, I walk into those churches like, "Hey, I'm still here. You can't get rid of me." Like I'm defiant,
Yeah.
you know?
I wonder if Paul and Ashley can relate to that scenario.
yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
I I
Yep, we
also
can.
I also remember once we were driving in my car and the local right-wing news talk station was uh, talking critically about Ashley, and our son, who he probably would have been 8 or 9 at the time, maybe was he all of a sudden he says, "Is that guy talking about mom?" And I'm like,
Ah.
"Yeah, he is." And he's like, "I'm gonna go through the radio and punch that guy right in the face."
Yeah, I love it.
Uh, which
Oh,
is
sweet
funny.
Sam.
Well, that's
Yeah.
Um,
actually another element that I should just throw in real quickly here. I have 3 daughters and a son-in-law.
Oh,
They're in
yeah.
their 20s and 30s, and they were supportive for me. They were helpful, so I appreciate them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
it
Well,
you
awesome.
when
What, Ash?
when I think about the inheritance that you're providing for your kids and, their families, like, it's such a powerful thing, like a hot knife through
Mm,
butter, like just standing in the way you have
mm,
and refusing to be shaken and making your case and suffering the consequences, making a sacrifice for people. Like it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that your family and you are living and loving through. And I do think there's an inheritance that comes with all that. That's,
oh, thanks. I mean,
you know,
one of the downsides is that my kids, because they were raised in a pretty conservative denomination, they tend to think that most Christians are not queer affirming. And so,
yeah.
I want to introduce them to Christians who are, but they just haven't run across that many in their lives, and that's a real shame.
And
Well,
I was going to ask if you said you went into this to make a difference. You
Yeah.
went ahead and went through the trial. Do you feel like that happened? Did you move the boulder a little bit, or is that yet to be determined?
I had 3 goals, and I feel good about making a difference on 2, but I failed in the third. I have had lots and lots of notes from queer people and allies thanking me for doing what I did, for giving them language to articulate their beliefs and intuitions. So I felt like I succeeded in encouraging queer people and allies, but I failed in moving the church to a fully affirming position. I'd like to hope that maybe it inched a little bit further, and in the future it'll be affirming more quickly because of what I did. But at least in the short run, that was a failure.
So that is definitely a please come back and let's pick up on that point, because I think Paul and I go round and round on this, and Paul is a little bit of a sort of known and disregarded figure in the evangelical church based on what Paul posts. And I'm always kind of like, but you're not persuading anybody. And then Paul's like, I'm not trying to persuade them. I feel like it's okay if all that burns down, and
Yeah.
I believe God is merciful, and people will hopefully find a path in the middle of that. But really, what is it important to be thinking about the institutions here, the institutions of faith, or maybe not? Maybe, I could be persuaded either way. But anyway, that's
Yeah,
definitely something that,
let me
yeah.
comment on that
Go
real
ahead.
quick. But first, let me ask you a question. Is there something like 400 million Americans? Do you know what our population is?
A little bit less than that. I
Little
would
less,
say about 350. Mm-hmm.
350 million. Okay. Pew polls in
333.3 million, according to
okay.
Google.
Boom. Boom.
So the Pew polls in, I think it was 2016, said that 14% of Americans who took their poll checked the box that said none under religious affiliation, NONE. They are nuns. In this year, that same poll went out, and 26% of Americans checked the none box. So if there's 333 million, we're talking a little less than 100 million people in America check the none box. They don't have a religious affiliation. However, something like 80% of the nuns still believe in God or a higher power. So you got nearly 100 million people who listen to Paul. Well, I like to think they all listen to you, Paul, but
That would be great.
there's 100
Seeing the
million
hate mail, you might think they do.
yeah, who believe in something like a higher power. Most of them probably can't articulate that very well, but they don't have a religious affiliation. I think that's a huge group of people who ought to be listening to Paul and me and others like us. And so maybe we're not moving the institutions, or maybe I'm not moving the institution of the Church of Nazarene as quickly as I think it should be. But I do think I'm having an impact on many people who aren't in that institution. And I feel good about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think that's very true. And I haven't looked lately, but I used to quote one of the uh, uh, surveyors who said we were at the lowest church attendance ebb in American history,
Mm,
but at the highest spirituality ebb.
mm,
And we had the least church attendees, but the highest amount of people who said they were spiritual. And I think there's something good about that. And I always kind of come back to Jeremiah saying, we all love Jeremiah 29:11, but that came in the middle of Jeremiah saying, yeah, the Babylonians are going to take us over, and that's God's mercy for that to happen. Or
yeah.
Jesus saying the temple is going to be destroyed, and that's happening. He didn't say pray that it doesn't. And so maybe
Mm,
there are times these things have to be broken down. But I
You
also
know,
have to believe you moved something. You and your family moved something in what you did, because
mm,
sacrificing self for love and
100%.
purpose always moves something.
mm,
And so
mm.
I
That's
do
it.
believe you
That's
moved
where
you
influence
moved
comes
something
from.
in the universe for
Yep.
sure.
I have to say, I grew up thinking that, because I'd hear all the statistics. I grew up Southern Baptist, and it was like, oh, thank God for us. And Jesus is kind of cool too. I literally as a kid once told my dad, who was a Southern Baptist preacher, Jesus was a good Christian and a very good Baptist. So I believed in the institution. That's what I was taught to believe. And we would quote the America's a Christian nation, and we thought it was because of the institution. now I'm like, no, actually, never mind any of that. Like, people have the Spirit of God in them.
Mm,
It's like we start with that. And if you are letting go of that original sin thing, and the institutions are what is bringing God into, no. It's the magic of the divinity, and it is in us. And
mhm.
so actually the institutions aren't really factoring into that at all. It just is.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe I worry a lot less about the institutions now because of that.
Well, yeah, I probably worry less too. Although I don't want to throw institutions out. Institutions are the way in which people try to um, maintain the gains that from the past. And I think that while institutions must change and they come and go, they have a role to play in trying to secure. I mean, like if Paul says, or both of you, if you say to me, "Hey, I think we're going to start a denomination that's queer affirming, that's aimed at folks who with backgrounds like ours," I would say, "Hey, that could have some value because I think there's some people who are looking for a community and a way of being." Um, so I'm not anti-institutional, but
Yeah.
I'm also willing to kick it at it when I think it's wrong.
Oh,
It's such an
yeah.
interesting thing, and I think like everybody who was a church planter, I was going to make the different church. We're going to be
Yes.
different,
Yeah.
and you end up becoming what you've always known in many ways. And so I'm in some ways like sometimes maybe we need to burn it down and
Sure.
then leave it burnt down, leave the ground fallow for a while, and let a future generation
Mm,
rebuild the institution so that we don't build the same thing we've always known and something
yeah.
new can
Yeah.
rise up. So maybe we've kept you over your time, and we do want to do what's on my mind, but first tell people where they can find you.
Well, I have a personal website that's my full name, thomasjord.com. But I also run a Center for Open and Relational Theology, and that URL is the letter C, the number 4, ORT.com. Those two places are probably the two best places to find me.
Okay, and I'll put those in the show notes on our podcast, audio podcast for people who can't see that. And I hope people will check you out. And you've got lots of good books. God Can't is a very good one. And
Thanks.
and what's your latest book?
I co-wrote a book called God After Deconstruction that came out a few months ago. It looks at the 8 legitimate reasons why people are deconstructing, some of which we talked about tonight, and then gives an open and relational response to those good reasons. So it's called God After Deconstruction.
Very cool. We will
Very
be
cool.
ordering right after the show, and we will talk about it on future
Oh,
episodes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, we're finishing with what's on my mind. Ashley, what's on your mind tonight?
Well, anyway, yeah. No, what's okay, so what's on my mind? I've had two interesting thoughts, like reading, and then I was at a conference today, and this guy kind of said the thing that I was thinking, which I love that. So I'm just thinking about this inner journey and like spiritual transformation that comes from like God in you and like working through your stuff and obviously dealing with our parts work that Paul and I are doing together. And I was reading something, and I can't even remember what it was, but it was talking about like maybe we're living in a moment where a whole bunch of human beings are sort of accessing this inner spiritual journey, and maybe just maybe we're on the brink of some kind of population level shift in consciousness. Now, I never in a million years thought I would ever string those words together. Like if you would have said, so if you go back to like 1994, Ashley, and you're like, someday you'll be talking about, shifting consciousness, I'd be like, get thee behind me, Satan. Um, but I'm now getting it. And there is something going on with just like this openness to a different way of thinking that is not competitive and that doesn't have an agenda, that is respectful of and like taking in and being aware of the presence of love and like being good with just that. and not trying to work it and not trying to manipulate it in some way. So that's kind of what I mean when I say the shift in consciousness. I'm finding more and more people talking that way. Well, wouldn't you know it? I go to this conference today, and this person who's from this nonprofit policy center in the Bay Area that does a ton of work around the country on social justice issues. And this nonprofit executive stands up and says these very things, like in this, like, you know, what if we are the ones who will build the nation that isn't yet? What if it's in us to do that? And like, we don't need permission, and just all like, what the frick is happening? Maybe there is something to this. And the thing I was reading was talking about how, like, you go back, you know, thousands of years, and the consciousness level and like what human beings were dealing with, that obviously very different than where we are today. So clearly our species evolves. And maybe it's the case that we're just about to pivot to like something our kids and grandkids will swim in or something. I don't know. That's what's on my mind.
Yeah. Well, we have to be spiritually connected because, like, just, you know, we thought we were the only ones in the world deconstructing. And then I go on social media and like, oh my God, there's like,
we're late to the party. You know,
there's
like,
a whole bunch of people doing this. And then conversely, like the right wing stuff happening in our country, Germany's having that problem now in their elections. France is having to fight that. So clearly there's a connection in humanity on this stuff. And Isaiah 43 says there's a new thing happening. So yeah, I'm all for that. Thomas, you want to go next, or you want me to go?
Why don't you go?
Okay. I was having a conversation with someone about the book of Job today, and I'm a believer that Job is a beautiful poem. I don't believe it's a narrative. And this person was very upset with me and was telling how Ezekiel believed Job was a real person because they listed Job in a sentence with Noah and Daniel. But I just have a problem believing that God is sitting in heaven somewhere entertaining Satan, and they're having a conversation saying, I bet if I kill Job's kids, he will curse you. And God is like, I take that bet. And so then Job's kids get killed and his animals get killed and all of this stuff. And then at the end of the story, Job gets new kids and he's like, okay, I'm good. I lost all my children, but things are good. I just don't believe that's a narrative story. So dealing with the Bible as myth or mythological writing of some version of something real that may have happened, I guess, is on my mind tonight. But I don't know any father that would say, well, I have new kids, so I'm all good now with the kids that I lost before. I don't think that happens.
No.
What's on your mind, Tom?
Well, I'm always speaking into my phone ideas that I wanted to put into future books. And I've been working on putting ideas on my phone for a book on photography, philosophy, and theology, because I'm a photographer as well.
Oh, wow.
And today I had this idea. There's a famous photographer named Cartier-Bresson, who is famous for this photograph of this guy jumping over this puddle. And he talks about the decisive moment, the moment in which you click the shutter to make the image. And as I was thinking about the decisive moment and my own metaphysical assumptions that we are momentary creatures, that we are drops of experience, that it's experience all the way down, I thought I need to write a chapter in which I start with the decisive moment, talk about our lives being comprised of moments, and then move into the notion that maybe existence itself is experiential or occasions, made up of occasions. So it's probably got nothing to do with what you guys talk about in this show, but that's what I was thinking about.
It's what's on your mind.
There you go.
Super interesting.
That is
Super
interesting. So is the reflection of the person in the puddle? Is it? I'm going to have to check out this picture of this person
Yeah.
jumping the puddle.
I should have been bringing that image up when you guys were talking so I could, well, I guess I don't know if I can share screen, but anyway, look up Henri Cartier-Bresson. Is a
Okay.
French photographer, and you'll see a guy jumping over a puddle he's holding an umbrella.
Very nice.
Very,
Well, Tom,
very
thanks
cool.
for making time for us tonight. Ashley, thanks for Ubering at breakneck speed back to get with us. And
Whew.
thanks to everybody who joined us on the live stream tonight. It's been fun.
Let's just say a quick word next week, our game plan, so everybody can keep us on task. Next week, our thought is Paul is going to do a little bit of an overview of what he went on the road to 15 southern cities and his talk on Christian nationalism. So you'll get to hear that. If you didn't get to make it to one of those 15 cities, you'll get to hear it next week. And then if you're really interested in the topic, you want to unpack it, learn more, special Zoom session on Sunday, the following Sunday. Paul, how do people learn more about that? They just email you off your website?
They can go to the website. The best way is to get on my e-list and get the updates from the e-inspire. So that's the best way to do it.
You can go to evangelicalish.com or pastor-paul.com, and you can sign up as a subscriber, and then you'll get emails that tell you all about this stuff.
And the presentation is entitled Jesus Christian Nationalist? ? All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you again soon.
Before we go, let me say thanks to you two. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's
Thank
great.
you. It was our pleasure.
Making the space for us. All right. Good night, everyone.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.